All right, bringing the energy back to the show. It is officially 2021, and we're just so excited to have you guys along for the ride. So this is the first episode that you're listening to. Definitely go back and check out some of the previous episodes. We've got a lot of gold in the last year. If this is just your first episode this year, welcome back. We're excited to have you, and just so thankful that you joined us for the content that we're going to have this year in the YVR REMO show. So one of the things that we love to do when we start our show is we love to honor and thank our guests. But before we do that, let's talk about what we're talking about here today. One big thing for a lot of people this time of year is New Year's resolutions. And with New Year's resolutions, generally speaking, a lot of people talk about money, making money, investing money, saving money, all of the above, buying homes, you name it. And we want to help you be a part of that. So we're certainly going to start the year off with a bang and have a conversation today about different ways for you to start thinking about making money in real estate in 2021. It's not an exhaustive list per se, but there are a variety of different factors that we talked about. Some you may have heard of, some you may not have. And we're going to spend some time this year bringing experts and variety of people talking about this. So definitely a valuable episode. This will set you up. This is going to be your base for your listening experience for 2021 with the YVR REMO show. As always, we like to thank everyone who's left us a 5-star review on iTunes. As a little bit of a reminder, if you leave us a 5-star review on iTunes, send us a little snapshot, a little pic so we know that you did so, and we will make sure to get you out a lovely Thrive mug along with some delicious local coffee so we can thank you for being a part of our life. Certainly very thankful for you guys. By the way, enjoy the episode. We'll talk to you soon. What's up, guys? You are listening to the YVR REMO show, where we talk all things Vancouver real estate and mortgages, take boring topics and make them interesting. Make sure to stay tuned to listen to everything you need to know how to put cash back in your pocket, create wealth in real estate, and simplify the complicated. Well, here we are, guys. First episode of the new year, and we've got a lot to live up to this year because last year was so incredible in so many different ways. Tough for some people and good for a lot. And I think just in terms of talking about the podcast, it was huge and a lot of fun. We started 2020 not really knowing where we were going to go with the podcast. We ended with a great episode at the end of the year talking about everything that we learned. And here we are in 2021 doing our very first episode, which I think is one that's going to last, I think, for a long time, talking about how to make money, which is what everybody wants to do when they start the new year.
Absolutely. How many episodes did we do last year? 40, was it 44? 45?
45.
Okay, we're committing to 50 this year. Now it's on the podcast, so we have to.
Yeah, so we got some fun stuff in store going forward this year. We've talked a little bit today about some different types of content that we're going to go throughout and some different ways that we're going to produce and bring that content to you guys. So if you're not already checking us out, make sure to be up on our social media feeds, Instagram, Facebook. Our man behind the camera, Paul, is always working his butt off trying to bring you guys the hottest and best content. So make sure to connect with us on there. But today's episode, getting right into it, is all about making money in real estate. And we're just going to go over a wide summary of the different ways that you can look to make money in real estate this year. It's not an exhaustive list by any means. It's a list of some of the more common opportunities that we have, or at least some of the opportunities that we're thinking of, and maybe some uncommon ones. And we'll be spending the year making sure to deep dive into a lot of these different strategies. Some you've heard of, some of you haven't, and definitely just excited to talk about this. Hey, Dean?
Yeah, absolutely. The first one hits home for most. Buying your first home. If you don't own a home, it's a pretty obvious one. Let's stop paying 100% interest in rent and buy your first home.
Yeah, the crazy thing about that is a lot of people don't actually view their principal residence as an investment, right? It's a place to live, and it's better than renting, of course, but people don't really think about the wealth that comes through your residence, right, over time. And it's pretty phenomenal. I think there was a stat, we've talked about this a couple of times, but 90% of Canadians' wealth is actually in their residence. It's in real estate, right? So getting off the fence and getting into your first home, even if it's 5% down, 10% down, if you're borrowing money from family, it's that's the best place to start, hands down.
Especially in the Lower Mainland in Vancouver, it is the number one driver of wealth. is the real estate that you own, and your primary residence is going to be the biggest piece of that.
Yeah, a lot of people listening to our podcast are people who maybe own real estate, but we also found out there's a lot of people that listen to our podcast that don't actually own any real estate right now and are just trying to figure out the best strategies to get into the market. We've done some podcast episodes on your down payment, so I'd suggest you go back to the library and pick out, I don't remember what number it is, but we'll try and post it in the show notes to listen to some of the episodes about down payment and getting your money there. But again, it's always surprising how many people don't think that buying your first home is an investment. So if that's not already on your list of goals this year, make it your list to buy your first home, and we'd love to help you get there. So let's get on to the second key opportunity going into 2021.
Buying your second home. Rental property, vacation home, short-term rental, all the above. Buying your second home is a great place to continue to make money in real estate. And you wouldn't be able to do that unless you had your first home.
All right, makes sense. Buy your first home, get your second home.
Yeah. The vacation, sorry, go ahead.
No, go for it.
The vacation one is huge right now, especially with, the restrictions in the pandemic. People want a place to go, and a lot of people don't think about the investment side of the vacation property, right? You can have a cabin on the lake. It doesn't have to just be for your own use. You can do short-term rental and actually produce a pretty good profit from that.
Yeah, so we kind of did like a subcategory from ways to make money in real estate. Buy your second home, buy a vacation home. A lot of people just think, to your point, that that a second home is just a rental property. But again, a vacation is one of those interesting ones where, and we had a few clients do this last year, where they were specifically looking for a place that they could spend some time, with their families and share the wealth for generations, as far as just, enjoying their vacation time. But a lot of our conversations actually centered around, okay, how do we make sure that this is a property that could also be considered an investment in some way, shape, or form, whether that's short-term furnished, short-term Airbnb, or maybe it's a long-term and it's just in an area that you like to spend your time. Maybe you just want to be in, I don't know, Kelowna or some other city, and you want to spend your summers up in a location or a place like that. How can you look at that as a vacation / rental property? And I think the blanket there covers pretty much short-term rental, furnished rental as far as vacation.
Yeah, you kind of get the best of both worlds, right? You get a place that you can use, even if it's 4 weekends a year, right? But you can also turn a profit, and some of these short-term rentals can produce really, really good rental income as well if you manage it properly and if you're up for that task.
Yeah, definitely some key considerations there on that point would be, if you are purchasing something as a short-term rental or a vacation property in a city that's not near where or close to where you live, make sure you understand the area really, really well. Pros and cons, of course. Obviously, we can get to a deeper conversation about vacation rentals in the future, but make sure you have a darn good property manager that you trust, because that is very important in those locations. But hey, Dean, do you want to talk a little bit about, just generally speaking, buying your second home this year? Because that's one we can't forget, just in general.
Yeah, we've seen that a lot this year, especially where clients have bought their second home that is now their move-up home. So going from, say, a condo to a townhouse, or a townhouse to a single-family home, and turning that previous home into the rental property. We've seen that really pick up. I don't know if it was just, because of COVID and people were looking to get a bigger home and then saw the advantages of, wow, I can actually keep my existing home and turn this into a rental. We've seen that really pick up, especially because you can now buy that second home with a minimum down payment and then, essentially have a rental property for 5% down in some cases, right? So that was a big one for sure, and I think that will definitely continue this year.
Yeah, and I think a big part of that is a lot of people do come to us with a plan of selling and buying, but we kind of don't push this strategy, but we want people to know their options, right, before it's off the table. So showing people what that can look like and what the long-term benefits are. A lot of people just don't think it's feasible, right, until we run some numbers, and if it makes sense, it makes sense.
Yeah, there's a few key ways that this strategy works too. Like, first and foremost, if you're moving into the home, the new property, you can buy that new home with less than 20% down, assuming it's insurable, which means less than $1 million. Of course, there's a few other parameters. If you qualify, that's key. So we've noticed that a lot of people who may not have ever thought they could do that made the move up to that second home in a shorter time frame. One of the other ways and reasons that this can work so successfully right now is the equity in people's homes today has gone up dramatically versus a few years ago. So your property's worth more, rates are lower. You can re-extend that mortgage, re-extend that amortization period, restructure it, and take that money over that new home.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, this buying your second home. This could be buying your next home. Really, we've seen a lot of clients actually restructure their existing portfolio. So maybe they have one and a two home. Now they're looking to buy number three. Refinancing those homes to your point, getting that equity for the down payment for the third property, right? So, just ultimately looking at your total scenario, and especially with the appreciation we've seen over the last 6 months, there could be some opportunity here to access equity for the purpose of a down payment.
I'll touch on that one more thing about the second property, and then we can move on to another strategy, because this is a little more high level. But so in the inverse, where you're buying the second home, where the second home is an investment property itself, not vacation, not short term, but maybe a long term hold property, where you're actually, again, same idea, pulling the equity out of your existing home and then putting that onto the other home. We saw a lot of people do that last year, and we see the opportunities to do that again this year are very large, because, again, the cost of borrowing is so low. Anytime the cost of borrowing is low, the cash flow is higher. You can pull money out for less. It doesn't negatively impact your budget. But again, just same idea, just in a different way. If there was ever a time, now is a time with money being so cheap.
That's a really good point, because we've seen cash flow increase as much as $500 on a lot of pretty standard situations. So increasing cash flow is just obviously going to help your overall debt servicing to qualify for the next property, right?
Yep.
And
Yeah,
I mean,
absolutely.
in the greater Vancouver and Fraser Valley, the prices are high, right? And as much as the rents are high, it's hard to cover that cost. So this has opened up a whole new window for people to get into the rental market and actually turn some profit month over month.
And this is probably a really good opportunity to think about for certainly the next 12 months, but probably even 24 months of opportunity of low rates, increased cash flow, qualifying for more, all the above, right?
And so to another point on that, as far as where opportunities lie, because we're seeing so many people leave the Lower Mainland to try and find, a detached house in a smaller city or on the island or in the Okanagan or, other parts of the country, we're suggesting, even just think about keeping and maintaining the local property here in the Vancouver region, because, again, as we know, appreciation is going to continue to grow in these areas, and your land that you own right now, or your property that you own right now, could still be a great long-term asset for an appreciation standpoint. So just looking outside the city, just, again, understanding that this asset that you're holding today locally could be a great long-term fit. And again, that could be the case in other cities, but generally speaking, in the Lower Mainland.
And so then in that case, you're not always thinking about cash flow, because you're potentially in a market that's appreciating at a faster rate, or, just at a bigger number.
For
right?
sure. And I think the last thing on this piece is selling and buying is very expensive. I don't think people really understand the cost until you go through it with real estate fees and mortgage penalties and transfer tax, right? So if you're moving every couple of years, it's going to eat away at your equity over time. It really, really does take a big chunk of your net worth away. So looking to see if you can keep that property to avoid some of those costs it can be huge over time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great points. Real estate agents, we love you, but there's a cost that we got to consider there. All right, this is one that I don't think a lot of people are going to think about, which is improving your property. So there's kind of a few different ways that we can take this, but right off the bat, property improvements. Why is now one of the best times to look at improving your property?
Well, interest rates. I mean, it's to our previous point, mortgage payments are lower because of the lower interest. So what we've seen clients be able to, upgrade their kitchen, upgrade those bathrooms that are run down, and still have the same mortgage payment.
I mean, not to mention, if you're putting a suite into your house, right, you're pulling out $50,000, but you're at a much lower rate. You're actually lower cost monthly, and now you're producing rental income in your own house, right? So it's an absolute no-brainer. And that whole market, that detached market with a suite, is absolutely on fire right now, as a lot of people know. So the value, from taking a detached home with no suite and putting yourself into that suited market, there's a big lift in that.
100%. I mean, I'm a perfect example of this right now. I am going through a refinance personally to improve my property that will get me rental income. I've seen my mortgage payment drop, and then I'm going to add cash flow from the rental. So that's a good point.
Yeah, massive. Just make sure that if you are doing the refinance and you are looking to do those improvements, a few things to consider. First and foremost, always get a second opinion outside of your bank, because there's, generally speaking, a lot of ways to structure that. But the second thing here is, when you're doing those improvements, think about the longevity of how long you're going to stay in this home and what your next steps will be afterwards. Will your intentions be to keep this home in 2 years? to move out or to stay there and buy another property, you should really understand that before you make these improvements, because you want to understand, again, who these improvements are actually for. That's pretty key.
Yeah, and on that note, like I've had some clients that have refinanced just before selling so that they could take some money and improve their property and make it look a little bit more appealing to the buyer's market, right? And they actually got more money out of their sale by doing that.
So key, so key. So refinancing to pull equity for any reason or rhyme right now is a good time, but particularly we're talking about your own improvements on your own property. That is a key. So guys, let's move on to the next one. This is one that we recently talked about, the BRRRR method.
Brr.
So we did a full podcast on this one. So I think we're going to keep it a little bit short, just because this strategy itself was one that we spent, I think, 25 minutes on, and we did have some good feedback from some people about it. It's something that a lot of people ask about. We can't not bring it up as a strategy to consider in terms of investing and in making money in real estate. That being said, again, it only works in certain locations and with certain considerations. So you just want to make sure that when you go into a strategy like this, you know exactly what you're talking about. So this is the buy, reno, refinance, rent type of strategy here. I mean, repeat is the last R, by the way. So you want to make sure that when you go into a strategy like this, you understand the climate, the area. We did an entire episode on this, so I think we'll just skip on forward to the next one. What do you say?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a really interesting one for people who, in particular, in the last couple of years live in Vancouver region. Assignments and pre-sales. Is this an opportunity to make or to lose money going forward?
So I would say yes, it's certainly an opportunity. It's always going to depend on location. You know, we've seen some markets, we've seen most markets thrive during the pandemic from an appreciation standpoint.
Nice plug.
And we've also seen markets actually not do so well. And we've talked about the condo market in the city of Vancouver, the downtown core. We've seen some of those prices take a hit, or just a lot of inventory. So things, maybe the price didn't take a hit, but they're just not selling as quickly. So buying a pre-sale in a certain market is going to be really important. To rely on the realtor that you're working with to get good advice on where you're buying a pre-sale, because it's not a guarantee, but there is definitely an opportunity to make a lift on a pre-sale.
Yeah, they definitely serve a purpose. I don't think anyone should be buying pre-sales with the hope of flipping it, because we're seeing a lot of people right now that are not in the greatest position. They're having to close. They're having to come up with a lot more money if the value isn't there. So there's risks, and I think it's just understanding the process, because it is different than buying resale. There are different risks involved, typically related to value in your personal situation that needs to stay the same until closing. But there's been a lot of people that have made a killing on pre-sales as well, right? So you just need to have an understanding. You need to know your worst case scenario. And if you can stomach that, then, there's a lot of good situations too, where maybe people don't quite have their full down payment, or, they're going to be getting a raise over the next year, and they're just not quite ready to take on home ownership, and a pre-sale can serve those people well.
That was going to be my point. So I'm glad you mentioned that, because if you're not ready to buy yet, but you do have that 5% or that, whatever that deposit is to get that pre-sale, and then, wait the year or two, you're now in the market of appreciation. You're now getting the benefits of home ownership from that appreciation. So that's a big one. If you can at least get in through a pre-sale, I do definitely advise that. Yeah,
one key point on that is what we do not recommend is we do not recommend purchasing a property, like a pre-sale property, solely for the purpose of reassigning that property before completion. That is where you get in hot water, and we've seen some companies and some real estate agents and some marketing that has pushed, like, buy this new investment, this pre-sale property, and you're going to see X percentage growth in the next 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, 4 years. And to be frank, we've seen a lot of people underwater this year, and that's put them in a position where they haven't either been able to close, or they're letting go of their deposit, or just flat out losing money. So again, got to be able to close. Make sure you can close on the property. There may be a ton of long-term value there. You can make money, but just don't do it without the ability to actually, of course, keep that property. All right. So we're going to talk a little bit about, actually, why don't we hop on, let's talk about construction for a quick second here, and then we'll talk into some financing strategies here. Construction is something that I think a lot of people just what I find is there are a lot of people who it's almost like a pipe dream to them. Like they're like, I can't find a home out there, so I think I'm going to build one. But it's never really considered an investment by most people, and I think there's a lot of reasons behind that. I mean, we had Danny Evans come on the show about a month ago, and he shared a couple of key reasons why people struggle getting into the construction space, and then a couple of ways to go about it. But it's maybe something that's not really heavily considered because it is more complex in terms of investing.
It certainly requires some experience, or at least surrounding yourself with the right people that have experience. So meaning the right partners in the building side and the development side, just making sure you have all your ducks in a row. But yeah, I mean, if you don't feel comfortable, I certainly don't recommend it.
Yeah, it's a much different process, right? Like you're typically renting or living with family for a year while you're building, and it's as much as you're going to hire a builder, and it's never going to be hands off. Like you're going to be involved in having conversations day to day on how progress is going, right? The financing is qualified similar to a standard purchase or refinance. Like you still have to qualify for the mortgage at the end of the day. Depending on the scale of the build, like how much money you're actually spending, you typically do need more money in on a build. They want to see that you have a contingency in case, you go over budget. But if you can figure it out and you're comfortable and the dollars make sense, you can typically make a lift or a profit in building that property compared to just buying the exact same home resale.
Yeah. You got to look at your time, like you mentioned, some oversight management. You got to look at your time as an investment in a project like that. And usually your time equates to the sweat equity and the lift that we're talking about.
Exactly. And again, to your point itself, I think one of the reasons that a lot of people actually don't proceed is because they don't realize it is taking on another job. Like when do go to build a home, but from an investment standpoint, if you can nail that and, build a couple properties and get them under your belt, it is a really good opportunity to earn money in real estate that you can continue to do for a lifetime if you want to go down that road.
Yeah.
One other piece that we didn't talk to, again, real estate related, we'll keep it relatively tight on this one, is joint ventures. Something that a lot of people don't think as an investment opportunity to make money, but it is something I want to open the door to any of our listeners to start having conversations with like-minded people that you trust, or be around networks of people that you trust who are interested in achieving the same goals. We're not getting into a deep conversation about joint ventures. We have a guest that's coming on, foreshadowing here in the next couple of episodes. He's going to talk a lot about joint ventures. But again, we find people who want to get into investing in real estate in one of these capacities that don't have the money, or they don't have the money, or sorry, other way around, I should say. Either they don't have the money or they have the income, one way or another. And it just comes down to figuring out a good match for someone who, may, for example, can qualify based on their income, but you have the cash or something of that nature. Maybe they have the expertise, but you have the other facts there. There's a lot of opportunities to venture with someone else to do well in real estate.
Yeah, it's a great point. There is pretty much every item we talked about here today could be looked at with a joint venture. So if you don't qualify or you can't make any of these items happen, maybe you could with a joint venture, right? And that's where the joint venture just opens up your world to a whole nother realm of possibilities.
Yeah, half of something is better than all of nothing, right?
Totally.
Agreed.
Well, one point I just want to bring up, but we didn't actually talk about, but we had the Smith maneuver. We talked about the Smith maneuver on a previous episode. Definitely something I would go back to, because if your home could be tax advantageous to you, that means you're putting more dollars into your bank account, and that just ultimately means you can make money on real estate with the Smith maneuver. So I definitely recommend going back to that episode.
Speaking of which, getting into mortgage strategies to have success this year, we have 4 key strategies right now. Of course, there's a whole bunch of ways around that, but we're gonna walk through some of the most common ways right now. We talk about it in a lot of our episodes in the last little while, but first and foremost, refinancing to reduce your interest rate, so key. So key. I mean, it doesn't matter if you qualified and you got your home 6 months ago, 6 weeks ago, or 2 years ago. It makes sense to start having the conversation right now, because there are literally thousands of dollars that you're giving up to banks and companies that do not need your money anymore that you could be looking to save. And again, when we say making money in real estate, hey, listen, if you're saving thousands, you're making money, because otherwise you're spending it elsewhere.
Mm-hmm. And it's not like thousands is unbelievable. Like my mortgage I refinance, it's $1,000 a month that I'm saving, from a 3.3 to a 1.8, right? So it's dramatic. It's not something to put on the shelf.
Yeah, investigate. Just ask the question, look at your options. You'd be blown away at what could be available. Even if you already think you have a really low interest rate, there's so much that could be restructured and optimized there.
Yeah,
And
I
we
think
do-
people get scared away by the penalties as well, and that's
Yeah.
where you want to make sure you have a clear understanding as to, again, the outlook and all the considerations that go around that. Like, how long is it going to take me to earn that money back? What's that cost going to be associated with that? And then the other factors, of course, of securing yourself for another 3 or 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah. And we do all of the work for free.
There we go. Love it. So refinancing, again, mortgage strategy is refinancing to invest. So we're going to piggyback on that first one, which is, so you've refinanced, you've reduced your interest rate, your payment's gone down, like Derek's $1,000 a month payment, reduction. That $1,000 a month could be worth another $300,000 of mortgage money right there for you, which would allow you to potentially, and I love this one, 100% finance an investment property. So again, you can use that capital, reborrow that back if you were already comfortable with the payment, and finance the entire investment property, not put down a penny from your own savings.
Yeah, that's huge. I mean, it's looked at like 100% financing, right? But you're just utilizing equity to get there. And as long as, you're cash flowing and the numbers make sense at the end of the day, with rates this low, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, and you may be somebody that doesn't want to own any more property than the primary residence that you have, and that's totally fine. But if you have equity sitting in your home, like $300,000 or whatever the number is that you mentioned, that should be looked at as essentially a dead asset if it's just sitting there not earning you money. So that's where I would definitely pick up the phone and have a discussion with your financial planner and say, hey, what can I do with this equity? Can I do something that would benefit me for retirement, or even maybe you are retired, maybe that at 1.8%, if that's what our going rates are, what could that net you from a financial plan? Believe it or not, most planners should be able to do more than 1.8% return.
Sure hope so. Otherwise, call us, because we'll get you introduced to a good one here.
So there should be some opportunity there.
So refinancing to invest is another key thing. Again, in whether it's in real estate or something else, again, we got to keep in mind, we do recommend a lot of our clients do hold a semi-diversified portfolio, at least, where they've got their money in different types of assets, maybe outside of real estate to a degree. But again, you want to make sure the advice that you get is good so that your ROI is strong on those investments, which leads us to the next one, which is private lending.
Yeah, private lending, something we have a lot of experience in. We've worked with a lot of investors that have taken equity in their home, invested it into private lending. So, or, just have money laying around that they want to invest. Private lending could be an option there. There's a lot of avenues, working with a mortgage investment corporation, or just lending your personal money to an individual that needs temporary relief. A lot of factors to look into. This is a topic that we've internally spoken about, talking more about, training more about, having a full episode dedicated to this topic. So if you don't know anything about private lending, stay tuned.
Yeah.
Foreshadowing. All right, gents, we wanted to keep this one tight and focused, and I think we did that in just under 30 minutes. We walked through a variety of different ways. Again, it's not an exhaustive list. There are some other ways, but here's some key ways for you to start thinking about making some money in real estate this year. Of course, we want to be a part of that journey, guys. So if you want to get started with any of these strategies, or if you have questions, send us a note, and we would love to take care of the mortgage financing piece of that. Anyhow, if you're loving the episode, make sure to leave us a review on iTunes. Share this out, because we need your help, and we are so thankful for having you listen.